Imagine a modern U.S. Marine platoon somehow time travels to the ancient Roman Empire and faces an entire Roman legion in battle. Who would win? I've considered a couple of potential scenarios and uncovered some interesting points. The first, and perhaps most likely scenario, is swift and decisive. History offers examples of technologically superior armies overwhelming less advanced ones. Consider the Battle of Cajamarca, where Francisco Pizarro's small force of 168 Spanish soldiers defeated 8,000 Inca warriors without a single Spanish loss. The Inca had never encountered firearms. When Pizarro arrived with what appeared to them as strange, firing boomsticks, and swiftly captured their emperor, they were thrown into utter chaos. Terrified by this unfamiliar technology, they scattered in all directions. This tactic, still relevant today, is known as shock and awe, unleashing overwhelming and immediate force at the outset of a battle to completely demoralize the enemy, leading to either ineffective resistance or outright surrender. It's quite possible the Romans would react similarly, resulting in their defeat. However, that scenario is somewhat predictable, so let's explore a more compelling possibility. Imagine the Roman legionaries underwent rigorous psychological conditioning, enabling them to resist initial shock and fear upon encountering rifles. Let's analyze the resources of both sides. Historically, the Romans were also adept at winning protracted battles by efficiently resupplying their legions, quickly bringing in food, equipment, and even reinforcements. For the Marines, however, restocking would be limited to raiding Roman settlements, a risky proposition as it involves entering urban environments where Romans have a superior knowledge of the terrain, increasing the risk of ambush. Furthermore, one of the Marines' key advantages is maintaining distance with their firearms, while the Romans rely on close-quarters combat with swords. In confined urban spaces with numerous angles, the Marines' ranged advantage would be largely nullified. If forced into close combat, the Marines would face a significant disadvantage, lacking both specialized training and appropriate gear. While Marines typically wear a flak jacket and Kevlar helmet, their limbs, face, and lower body remain exposed to prioritize mobility, a critical factor in modern warfare. The average legionnaire, on the other hand, would be far better protected by their armor, making raiding villages a less appealing option, especially given the high value of each Marine life, considering their potential to inflict casualties on the Romans. Moreover, Roman armies historically employed scorched earth tactics, as evidenced during Hannibal's campaigns, destroying food supplies and settlements that could be used by the enemy for resupply. They would even deploy less valuable troops, such as slaves, to maintain constant harassment and pressure on the enemy until they were exhausted before engaging with their main force. Based on this analysis, the Marines' best chance of success lies in a swift victory. They need to remain in open rural areas with limited natural cover to maximize the effectiveness of their weaponry, which in turn would make them vulnerable to supply constraints. We must also remember the Romans' proficiency in dividing their adversaries through promises of power and rewards. However, given that we are disregarding morale, we will set that aside. The Marines do possess one significant logistical advantage: night vision goggles. This technology allows them to operate effectively under the cover of darkness, an unimaginable capability for the Romans. If the Marines were to raid villages or eliminate legionaries under the cloak of night, their chances of success would be greatly enhanced. Now let's delve into the core aspects of the potential battle. Considering the equipment carried by the Marines and their significantly smaller numbers, their maneuverability will likely dictate the battlefield. The optimal terrain for the Marines would be a flat, open plain devoid of natural cover, except for a defensive position from which to defend themselves from the Romans' launching of their pila. The Romans would most likely launch a direct attack, so the Marines would shoot at them or change their position. While the Romans attempt to organize, the flanks of their line would be so distant from the Marines that Roman soldiers would essentially advance blindly, lacking clear orientation. A more effective strategy would be a multi-file formation with spacing between each file. A 5-file line would span approximately 2 kilometers, cumbersome yet more manageable. The Roman cavalry would also find it difficult to make an impact. Marine equipment would allow them to detect charging horses well in advance, resulting in the swift elimination of the cavalry. Furthermore, horses are large, easily targeted animals, and even if not killed outright, the sound of gunfire would likely spook them. The most effective tactic for the Romans to close the distance would involve a front line of expendable soldiers armed only with swords, allowing them to run as swiftly as possible towards the enemy. These soldiers would serve as sacrificial pawns, allowing the troops behind them to advance closer to the Marines. The M2 40B medium machine guns would undoubtedly be the most significant obstacle for the Roman legionaries. These formidable weapons can fire up to 950 rounds per minute, requiring a reload after every 100 rounds, a process taking about 5 seconds, and occasional barrel replacement, also taking 5 seconds. This setup would create a veritable meat grinder for the advancing legionnaires, forcing the Romans to prioritize eliminating these gunners with their paella. Each Marine would need to eliminate approximately 117 Roman legionaries, requiring exceptional accuracy, essentially 1 kill per bullet due to their limited ammunition supply. However, while Marines are required to carry a minimum number of rounds, they often carry significantly more than standard issue. One considerable advantage for the Marines, yet unaddressed, is the potential use of tear gas. Equipped with gas masks, the Marines would gain a tremendous advantage over the legionaries, who would have no means of protection. In conclusion, the Marines would likely prevail in a direct confrontation with 5,000 legionaries. However, the Romans might still stand a chance by adopting a more strategic approach, engaging in a war of attrition, waiting for the Marines to exhaust their supplies while avoiding nocturnal ambushes. We could also entertain a third scenario, that the Marines cannot be descendants of the Roman soldiers, as killing them could create a time travel paradox, potentially destroying the Marines themselves. However, that is an entirely separate consideration, so we should disregard it.
I don't think you'll be able to click on the next video until time runs out. 3, 2, 1, you last.